Welcome to Big Business This Week. I'm Dave Briggs on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. In his farewell address, President Biden warning of an oligarchy of extreme wealth, power, and influence taking shape in America. He talked about AI, the most consequential technology perhaps of all time. Biden, however, said very little about the economy he leaves behind. Rob Sockin is a global economist at Citi, and he joins us now. Rob, since Biden didn't say it, what do the numbers say about the shape of the U.S. economy as his presidency comes to an end?
It's a great question, and thanks so much for having me. As we go into 2025, we are seeing a U.S. economy that is remarkably resilient, and one that, in my view, is achieving a soft landing. We have inflation that is continuing to gradually move down to the Fed's 2% target. And we have robust economic growth growing at a pace that's historically well above trend. We've been the best performing economy of all major developed markets. And if you look at the labor market, we look to be in a place where job growth is stabilizing around a solid level, and the unemployment rate is stabilizing around a low 4% handle. And so I put all of that together, and it's an economy that in aggregate looks to be in very a solid shape. And so I think Trump in his inauguration next week is inheriting a U.S. economy that is really the envy of other developed markets.
It's so remarkable to me, Rob, that you just said more about the economy than the very president that arguably is responsible for it. It's no wonder his approval is at 36%, near the low of his presidency. So from a public perspective, will his economic legacy be similar to that of Jimmy Carter, of inflation, and where are we on that fight?
I think, as you highlighted, inflation is the key word. That yes, we are in an environment where inflation is moving down gradually. It's moving close to the Fed's target. We're almost at the end of this inflation battle, but it's been a tough battle. And inflation, if you go back a few years ago, was running at the highest level since the 1980s. That bit into a lot of consumers' pockets, particularly lower income households that have felt more stress within this environment. So even though we're achieving that soft landing, it still created a lot of challenges and hardship. And I think you've seen around the world that inflation has been the key thing that has been driving elections, and that in general, many leaders have lost their positions, or their parties have lost their positions because of this inflation regime that we've been through over the last few years. We saw that in Canada as well very, very recently. So I think we'll look back and say that, we got a soft landing, which is a very unique outcome. But at the same time, voters really don't like inflation, and it has been a challenging environment, particularly for some households.
Indeed. All right, so Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon said yesterday there's been a meaningful shift in CEO confidence since Trump was elected. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the sentiment indicators in the US, you see a very clear pattern of business sentiment in particular moving significantly higher since Trump was elected. You see that in measures of CEO confidence. You also see that in the small business survey, which also jumped significantly when Trump was elected for his first term. I think what you're seeing in these surveys, when you look at the responses, is they're probably moving up on expectations that you'll get an environment of deregulation, which Trump has promised he'll do in his early days, and also an environment where his tax cuts will be extended. Maybe you get some other types of tax cuts along the margin. And so that combination of deregulation, tax cuts, and probably expectations of solid economic growth, I think are adding up to that, CEO excitement and business excitement that you see in the U.S. surveys.
Stocks, however, were essentially flat and since Trump was elected prior to Wednesday when they jumped on that inflation news. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and that's a real challenge. They had moved up a fair amount when Trump was elected, and you had that pullback until recently. And I think part of that is reflecting the move up in long-term rates that we've seen. We've had some of that pullback as well, but U.S. interest rates are up pretty significantly on the long end of the curve. That's going to weigh on certain types of activity. And then the other thing I think is, we're in an environment of high policy uncertainty, and I think markets are continuing to digest the risk of tariffs coming from the Trump administration, particularly the risk of some of the larger promises or threats he's made on tariffs during his campaign and since that period, things like 10% across the board tariffs, 60% tariff on China. We don't think those things are going to end up coming to fruition. We think you'll get a much more mild tariff scenario. But I think the markets are digesting a lot of the news going into his inauguration. And there is a legitimate fear about what large-scale tariffs could do to not just the economy, but to the equity market.
Yeah. And it seems like a lot aren't taking them seriously. But if the tariffs are put in place, how do you think they impact inflation and, to your point, the broader economy?
Yeah, it's a real challenge because I think what we saw in 2017, where he put mostly tariffs on China, some other tariffs in some other spaces, but not to any of the extremes he's talked about the campaign trail, you really didn't see too much of an effect in overall in inflation, and the U.S. economy generally performed pretty well. But I think if we're in an environment now where you get significantly more tariffs than you had in his first term, that could lead to drags on U.S. growth and at least temporarily a boost in U.S. inflation. That's particularly true if we get large-scale tariffs. Some of the simulations we've done show that you could get pretty significant downside effects to the economy and upside pressure on inflation. So I think it really depends on how they come. If you end up in the more mild scenario, I think the economy can weather those effects very well. But if you end up in some type of tariff or trade war, I think those could be detrimental for the U.S. and also the global economy. So it's a very fine balancing act. And I think most market participants would also be worried if you end up in that more extreme scenario because of the effects on the U.S. economy and the global economy more broadly.
Excellent stuff there from Citi's Rob Socken. Really appreciate the time, sir. Thank you. Still to come, conflicting news on Sunday's TikTok ban, and we'll hear directly from a content creator on what this ban means to her booming business. Welcome back to Big Business This Week. The TikTok ban goes in place Sunday, and the prevailing wisdom was users would have months to continue to create content and or scroll until the app slowly degraded because it was no longer in the App Store and therefore could not be updated. That was the prevailing wisdom until the information reported otherwise. Kaya Yuriev had that scoop, and she joins us now with the latest. Kaya, thanks so much for being here. What are you learning?
Thanks for having me, Dave. Yeah, it came as a big surprise, and it's causing quite a stir for creators, managers, users, because like you said, people had the assumption that they would still be able to access the app. Our understanding is that TikTok is making that decision to shield legal liability for their providers. But it also obviously sends a message, right? And it's going to really bring the impact of the ban home, that this app is going to be gone.
Yeah, I shared that news with a couple of 12-year-olds who I picked up from dance, and they were panicked as if they have to download all their TikTok content. So what will happen for the 170 million American users on Sunday?
So barring any sort of government intervention, either from Biden or SCOTUS, which doesn't seem likely, although now there's reporting from NBC last night that the Biden administration is sort of weighing whether there's anything they can do, which is sort of an ironic twist considering Biden, signed this bill into law. But barring any of that, the plan is for TikTok to pull the app. So even if you're an existing user, if you open the app on Sunday, the plan is, and of course this can change, is that you'll be met with a pop-up that basically takes you to a website with information about the ban, and you will not be able to go onto TikTok and see any videos.
And could you use it, access it via a VPN?
Yes, I mean, that's always a possibility, right? Okay. People can do that, but I think the vast majority of people are not going to be doing that. But yeah, that is a possibility.
You mentioned Biden supported this law. President Trump supported a ban of TikTok. This was a bipartisan majority of Congress, which they don't agree on anything. It appears the Supreme Court will support a ban, but a new wrinkle has TikTok CEO Shou Chew attending the Trump inauguration, sitting near former presidents and family members. What does that indicate to you?
I mean, he's also met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. So this is not the first time that we've sort of seen their interaction. I mean, I'm sure that TikTok is hopeful that, even if the app goes down and the ban goes through on Sunday, on Monday, we have a new president. So I think there is still some hope. Trump has indicated that he wants to find a way to save TikTok. So clearly it indicates to me that the company is speaking with the president.
Okay, so my theory has been for weeks that the president would simply tell his new Attorney General Pam Bondi, do not enforce this law, do not fine these Apple and others, and simply she says, okay, TikTok lives. Why doesn't that happen?
So there's this, everyone has sort of said, okay, that he has the power to not enforce, but it's really up to Apple, Google, and Oracle whether they feel they have enough assurances from the Trump administration to not enforce the law. The fines are very hefty. I'm sure they have concerns. Could they be retroactively fined? They're still breaking the law. This is a law. So the question is whether they are going to take that risk and do that, and what type of assurances they would need beyond just, Pam Bondi at a press conference saying we're not enforcing it. So that is, I don't know if that's the silver bullet solution here.
Trump and big tech have certainly becoming closer and closer and closer in this big group hug. So it would be interesting. Tim Cook himself gave $1 million to the inauguration as a personal donation. So how are creators reacting to this potential ban?
So this has been a threat for 4 years, right? Like you mentioned, Trump kicked all this off in 2020. So I think creators have had a lot of time to prepare. They've moved followers over the past few years and built up presences on Instagram and YouTube and other platforms. But if you spend any time on TikTok, there is sort of this collective meltdown of, oh my gosh, this is now happening. Because I think a lot of people were in denial and didn't really understand, like, okay, this is a law now, actually, and there's a countdown and a timeline to this. So there's a lot of panic, especially for creators who have their biggest followings, for creators who have made a career off of TikTok Shop. They don't really have an alternative to go to. Small businesses, advertisers who spend a lot of money on TikTok. So there is definitely a lot of panic, especially as the deadline's getting closer.
It should be interesting. So what's your best guess how this ends 1 week from now? Will we still be able to access TikTok? And what about those two other apps, RedNote, which is the #1 free downloadable app on the App Store, and Lemonade, which is #2?
Yeah, so Lemonade is also owned by ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok. So Lemonade is also going to be banned on Sunday. What's interesting, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, is the bill opens the door for the president to ban other apps owned by foreign adversaries. So it's very possible that RedNote could also, under this law, get banned in the future if President Trump decides that. But my best guess is hard. I mean, I think that it will go away on Sunday. I think there is a possibility that Trump and TikTok can work something out and bring the app back. But I think the app is going to go dark on Sunday. I don't see an intervention at this point.
Perhaps they want that panicked reaction by 170 million Americans.
Say hi. Michael, the new guy who's kicking ass and taking names. Yes, put a new clutch in this lovely truck. Should have heard it when it came in. And I'm over here just, you got a question? Swapping parts on 2 motors.
What does a TikTok ban mean for the millions of creators and small businesses reliant on the platform for vital income? Let's ask the very creator we just heard there, the She Mechanic, as she's known on TikTok, Desiree Hill from Crown's Corner Mechanic in Conyers, Georgia. Great to see you. You've accumulated more than 87,000 followers on TikTok. Kudos. When and why did you become a content creator on TikTok?
Well, really, it was to let more people know that females can do this job and we can do it very well.
So when did you start and why did you say TikTok is the right platform for me?
I tried Instagram, I tried Facebook, and for some reason, I just could not reach that audience. I couldn't oh my gosh, I would send out ads and I would reach maybe 100 people. And then all of a sudden tried it on TikTok and I was reaching thousands. I mean, the difference was huge.
Really, that is so interesting. So, how difficult was it to kind of find your voice and to resonate on the platform, or was it immediate?
It was kind of immediate. I was running my mobile mechanic business at the time, and my children would be along with me. And my son was like, let's get on TikTok. This is going to make a big difference. And we started recording everything that we were doing. And at first, it was just kind of to show people that I was doing mobile services in my area, and hopefully I would get more calls for the business. But then people from all over the world, not just the country, started following me and sending us questions, and then business started coming from across the country, and it was just huge.
Not that you need more exposure, but tell us about your business and the type of content you post.
Well, after I started posting on TikTok, I grew so much in my mobile mechanic business that within a year I was able to then lease a 9,000 square foot building and hire 4 employees because our content just kept getting bigger and bigger with more followers. So once I did that, I started recording all the jobs that were coming into the shop with all my mechanics, recalls that were coming in, anything that we were finding difficult for other people that might come across that issue around the country. We were recording it to let them know. So it wasn't just about, hey, I can do this. It's about, here's a warning for something you might see. Here's how to do something. Let us show you, and you might, be able to complete the job a little better.
So it was an immediate reaction, your business growing with your online presence growing.
Oh, yes. I mean, I tripled my business in a year. It was phenomenal.
Tripled your business in a year. So now we have this TikTok ban looming on Sunday. How concerned are you that it will impact your business?
I am deeply concerned. Every single day, I either get a call, an email, or a walk-in from not one, but usually up to 3 customers or wanting to be customers for business. If that goes away, I can't reach the same people. I have already gone through that. I've tried, and it just won't happen. So I know there's going to be a huge decline in my business. We have built a customer base, but we have to keep growing. I want to buy this building. I want to, expand more. That's not going to happen if we lose TikTok. I know it's not.
You mentioned initially you weren't resonating on Instagram or Facebook. Has that changed? Is there any other platforms where your content does resonate like this?
Well, I took this entire week to test the platforms. So I created one ad, and I put that same ad with the same demographics out with the same amount of marketing money attached to it, to Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. There's nothing that compares. I reached 30,000 people in 24 hours on TikTok, and Instagram only reached like 1,500.
That is remarkable.
That's a huge difference.
I'm just curious, Desiree, when you hear all this stuff that a bipartisan majority of Congress agreed that TikTok is a national security threat and that it appears the Supreme Court will agree, are you concerned by this app being a national security threat? What do you make of that?
No, I'm not, because to be honest with you, I feel like if anybody wants to get our information, they're going to get it. There's more than one way to obtain that kind of information. And I really don't think that other countries are a threat to us as much of our own country sometimes.
It would appear that President Trump wants to save TikTok. He has invited the TikTok CEO to be at his inauguration. What would be your message to the president-elect?
I think he needs to take into consideration that it's more than just a social media app. This is a thriving app for entrepreneurs, for business owners. You need to hear the people. You need to listen to us sometimes.
Excellent, excellent message and performance here, and kudos to all your success on the platform. We recommend everyone follow the She Mechanic.
Thank you.
Desiree, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Coming up, the latest on the devastating California wildfires and the looming insurance disaster in California. Welcome back to Big Business This Week. Time now for our friend Peter Green, author of our Big Business This Week newsletter. Peter, good to see you. So the fires devastating the Los Angeles area, still burning. The Palisades fire scorching more than 23,000 acres, still just 22% contained. Now rents are going up. What does all this mean for the future of real estate in LA and the slowly collapsing insurance market?
It's a mess. Everything is going to have to be rethought. I mean, the one tiny silver lining to this is that if your house burned down, you didn't actually lose the full value of what you paid because you still have a plot of land with the view over the sea. But a lot of people were not insured. People who had their houses for years didn't have a mortgage, or people with high-end houses who didn't insure for the full value or the full replacement value. And then there are people who just couldn't afford insurance, people who lived in trailer parks and places like that, never really thought about insurance. If they didn't have a mortgage, they weren't forced to. So the first big problem is, how much are people going to get, and will they be able to rebuild, and what's that rebuilding going to look like? And just as happened after Hurricane Sandy in New York, after the big hurricane in New Orleans, wages for it's just going to cost a lot more to rebuild. Workers are going to be asking for more. There's going to be a shortage of reliable contractors and a shortage of building materials. It's going to be a big, expensive mess. On the insurance side, it's really messed up. Insurers have known for a while that California was just waiting for one big, huge conflagration, and they kept raising their rates. California in the last year allowed them to do all the things that Florida had done, which was use probabilistic statistics, like what's likely to happen here, pass off the reinsurance cost to customers, and allow a whole bunch of people to get into a state-sponsored insurance program, which they call FAIR. And like in Florida, the insurers in California said, hey, we don't want to pay for the backup to FAIR if there's a huge catastrophic thing. We don't want to pay for it. So they got all of that in the last few months. It hasn't helped. It's not going to help the people. What's most likely to happen is that rates are going to go up. Every policyholder in California is going to get done for some of the cost, because that's how this FAIR, the state last resort insurer, works. But it looks like a lot of people won't be able to get the kind of insurance they needed, or won't be able to afford it. It doesn't look like any of the insurers are going to go out of business, though.
Yeah, State Farm non-renewed 30,000 policies prior to the fire, and 69% of them were in the Palisades. To your point, this goes to the FAIR plan, and ultimately, this will wind up on Governor Gavin Newsom's lap, his desk, to solve. Our thanks to Peter Green. Go to cheddar.com/BBTW to sign up for our weekly newsletter. Don't go away. More Cheddar up next.